Change is always hard, but it's inevitable. So it's definitely a collaboration. We can't do anything silo anymore. We can't be standalone and do things that way anymore. We used to be able to, but we can't anymore. We're too engaged in each other's lives, no matter whether you figure it's the internet, social media, or just progressing. So I think collaboration and having other people be able to support the idea and have some people know, because it's really a trust factor. When somebody wants to come in and sell me a product or sell me something, I want to know who they are, who do they know, how did they get my information, is this a valuable product? I want to test it out. If it's a tool, if, like you said, it's an app, if it's software, just because, a fire chief doesn't mean we take on everything. We had this gentleman one time that he really wanted to get us an air exhaust system for our fire station. Well, it was a lovely product, but he obviously didn't do his homework, because our trucks are in sheds and barns and garages. We certainly don't need that exhaust system. So, knowing that the person who's coming to you or talking to you about change really knows what you're about before they're just doing that hard sell.
Keep the faith and keep at it, and really reach out as much as you can. Networking is a biggie. As a matter of fact, I just placed a call yesterday up to the NRC, which is the National Research Council of Canada. They are the equivalent to the National Institute of Standard and Technology here in the United States.
The fire service has a saying here in the United States that it's 200 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. And sadly, that seems to be the case in many organizations where, and if you want a clear example of that, just look at the helmet styles. You try to introduce a European helmet style in some of these traditional American fire departments, they'll run you out. But just because that's the way we've always done it. It's a very deep-seated tradition. I would say that if you're trying to advance or implement change in the department, the first thing you need to do is make sure that you have good data. Make sure that what you're trying to implement is backed up with facts. It's not just your good idea. Edward Deming once said, you're just without data, you're just another person with an opinion. And, but beyond good data, you have to build relationships laterally and vertically. Your city council, your city manager, those vertical relationships are important, but laterally with your neighboring departments, with your other department heads in law enforcement, in, the other departments in the city, to make sure that maybe together you can build something instead of doing it on your own. You don't go far trying to go alone. But again, it starts with good data. It starts with having a good relationship with people, and then communication, clear communication, and make sure you stay on message. You're going to have opposition. There are people that just don't want to change, not because they don't like your idea necessarily, but because your idea is different, and different makes them uncomfortable. And what they don't like is the feeling of being uncomfortable. So if you really try to focus on a way to make them more comfortable with the change, and sometimes that's through data, and sometimes that's through storytelling and through showing why it is important to change.
Change is not a well-received element in any industry, in any profession, or in any capacity. As human beings, we get very comfortable in certain ways of doing business. And certainly when we talk about the public sector and the emergency services, and specifically the fire service, again, we are very reluctant to make those changes due to a lot of external factors that just have conditioned us to operate in a very consistent manner in a very dynamic environment. So it's feasible, but at the same time, it's challenging at best. And when we talk about stakeholders, those stakeholders are either individual groups, agencies, departments, other municipalities, other departments within municipalities. So there are subsets upon subsets, or it may be very simplified relative to how we group them. But again, there's both the immediate, the short, long-term related planning that has to be identified and implemented. And at the same time, the implementation plan and those rollouts do require an understanding that through the consensus building process, through the stakeholders, that one has to constantly be aware of and sensitive to the checks and adjust. The plan may call for certain objectives and targets and benchmarks, but what happens when we fall short, or more importantly, especially with evolving technology, what happens when we have an established plan based upon a certain level of criteria with a certain goal based upon a certain technology basis that already has been developed, and then suddenly we're into this change management plan, and guess what? There's something new that's come about that actually makes an improvement or makes us have to pause and take a step back. So technology continues to be very fluid, and both in terms of its development, implementation, and more so its adaptability to what it is that we're trying to implement it into. So it's a very fluid process, and even more so today with the change management portion of it. So you have to remain very flexible relative to what you're doing, but rigorous, but at the same time, just recognizing the external changes that might occur that may have an influence on that plan. And the worst thing that I would advise from experience is that when you are confronted with some challenges that may change the direction of your plan relative to technology being implemented or some type of a technologically based change, and something new comes about that's either positive or negative, don't neglect it. You just need to be very transparent, meet it head on, bring that information forward, and then best see. Sometimes it's best to sometimes terminate exactly where you're going with that change management, and sometimes just go back to step one and start over again. Because once you implement something that already has either faulted or also may be somewhat antiquated within an 18 or 24 month period, again, the advancements are occurring at such a rapid pace that sometimes when we finally get to that final stage of an implementation plan from our change management, we now have an antiquated process or technology that is not keeping up. So the rapidness in which change and technology is occurring on a global basis through communications, and I think the availability and sharing of information is so immediate that in itself is a challenge when we try to play catch up or try to be on the cutting edge of it, because you're never going to be on the cutting edge. As soon as you implement something, chances are there's that better and newer thing or a different take on something that will maybe modify what you're currently doing.
People, policies, and procedures are going to not necessarily move things quickly for us. There are going to be budget constraints, there's privacy challenges, there's functional technology shortcomings, there's training and education that goes along with it, and it's going to be a heavy lift. It's not going to be easy, and that doesn't matter. And we didn't get into this because it's easy, or and if and we keep striving and we make little increments, and the collective motivated and collaborative folks continue to move the ball, and you're going to have to stay at it. Eighth grade, excuse me, eighth graders are going to be using augmented reality in science class while we're still having this conversation about first responders. And so it's going to get built for entertainment and gaming, and regardless of whether the first response community are leaders. And there are many, many leaders in the field.